Following the events that unfolded yesterday in Washington, D.C., we've been hearing growing calls from Democrats here to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office for his remaining 2 weeks. We heard that as well from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, saying that it would be the most effective way to kind of get a control of the situation, which would be removing the president from office and invoking the 25th Amendment. And now many of his colleagues, not just in the Senate, but also in the House, joining in on those calls, or perhaps even in one case here, superseding that call ahead of what we heard from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. I want to bring on our next guest here. That would be the Congressman from Michigan, Representative Andy Levin joins us now. And Congressman, thanks for coming on here. I mean, first off, just want to check in on how you're holding up, how you're feeling here, as again, we hear from you that invoking the 25th Amendment and removing President Trump from office would be the best solution right now. But how are you holding up?
Well, I'm probably going on adrenaline, Zach, but I'm fine. I'm in my office. We did the work we had to do last night. We returned and we ratified the results of the Electoral College vote. And that's the last step before Inauguration Day itself, when Joe Biden will become the next president of the United States and Kamala Harris, our next vice president.
Yeah, pretty extraordinary to see those scenes play out from the late night session yesterday. To Zack's point, you have joined your Democratic colleagues in the House in calling for the vice president to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. We had a guest on earlier who said, look, even if there is a case here, there's just not enough time to do it. Walk me through your timeline and how realistically you try to move forward on this case to invoke the 25th Amendment.
Well, the problem is that the president both fomented an insurrection against our democracy yesterday and then sort of also at the same time abdicated his job. He watched on television with glee, I guess, as a mob overran our Capitol. And I think it's important for your viewers to know he did not really help get the National Guard up there. Our Armed Forces Committee Chairman Adam Smith was directly calling the Defense Department and military leaders. Other colleagues who happen to know General Milley, the vice president, was involved. So Donald Trump is, not acting as a president of a democracy. And so it's sort of like if there's a health crisis, you have to deal with the patient and their condition, and you don't really say, well, it's inconvenient, they need to go to work or something. You have to deal with the crisis at hand. And let me just say one more thing. This isn't really about Democrats. There are people in his administration talking about this. I wouldn't say the National Association for Manufacturers is sort of one of the leading groups that supports Democrats, even though I have a lot of friends there, and they have called for invoking the 25th Amendment. So this is something that's being discussed widely among the leadership of the business community and civil society in Washington and beyond in America.
Yeah, and Congressman, I mean, obviously it wasn't just Democrats who were at risk yesterday when we were watching the events unfolding. Together, both parties here watching it and kind of trying to secure safety there as it all happened. I mean, given that, what's kind of the current take right now on the response? And we've been hearing from a few congressmen and women about the idea that security protocols should have been enforced and improved compared to what we saw play out. I mean, what are you hearing as you discuss this in terms of reasons as to why that wasn't the case yesterday?
Well, obviously there was a security breach of huge proportions yesterday, so that we need to look at that and figure it out. I have to say, just personally, from my experience as a member of Congress, I love the Capitol Police. I am grateful to them. They do, generally a really great job protecting us. So we'll have to see what went wrong. One of the things that's really crazy and astounding is you can't help but juxtapose the way these almost all white, many white supremacists, we saw anti-Semitic and racist T-shirts and so forth in the crowd. these people were treated with kid gloves, whereas when peaceful protesters go out to say, hello, Black Lives Matter, let's not kill black people, when, even if they're unarmed out in their neighborhood, there's pepper spray and batons and violence from law enforcement often. And here, this violent crowd that was breaking into the Capitol, breaking windows, destroying property, was pretty much treated with kid gloves. So that's hard not to notice.
We've had a number of guests point. I was going to say we've had a number of guests point that out. You just put the images side by side between what played out yesterday and the Black Lives Matter protests, and it seems pretty apparent how the handling is different on that front. While we have seen the president really fuel some of these conspiracy theories since the election, the reality is there are very, very deep divisions in the country. We saw that exposed during the election, the presidential election, once again exposed in Georgia and those Senate runoff races. Do these divisions continue beyond yesterday, or was yesterday kind of the tipping point for both parties to say, maybe we need to tone down the rhetoric here, maybe cooler heads need to prevail to be able to push forward on this agenda with a new president coming in?
Well, Akiko, let me say sort of two things about that. One is yesterday, the day before, but whatever, the people of Georgia elected the first person of color ever elected by Georgians to the Senate, a black man and a young Jewish man, to the United States Senate. Blacks and Jews have been fighting together for civil rights for decades. My dad went to Mississippi in 1971 to register voters with a young man named John Lewis, and they later served for 25 years together in the Congress. But, so this is a really stunning story of progress and hope of, for the South and for our whole country. But I think it's really important to realize that after this assault on our Capitol, some of my Republican colleagues cried crocodile tears about how horrible this violence is never acceptable and so forth. And then they went right back to trying to overthrow our democracy by nullifying the votes of millions of Americans in Arizona and Pennsylvania, as it were. But it doesn't matter where it is, right? And the thing is, they said, we just need to talk about this. This just needs to be investigated, which is completely false because it all was investigated. As you know, there were 60 lawsuits. Every single judge in state and federal court, judges appointed by George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Clinton, and Trump himself, all throughout these lawsuits. And so the idea that we just sort of need to keep talking about this, these conspiracy theories and so forth, is outrageous, and it was an attempt to overthrow democracy. And I frankly hold my colleagues more responsible for undermining our democracy than misguided citizens who should be held culpable, for doing bad things in the Capitol. They're elected federal representatives, and it's completely inexcusable what they did and they continue to do to humor a would-be dictator. It's just outrageous, and we've got to stop it.
Well, here's to hoping that things can move forward beyond this. Certainly a lot of people seeing this as one of the ugliest days in U.S. history. Congressman Andy Levin, it's good to talk to you. Appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks so much, Akiko. Best to you, and stay safe out there.